Welcome to Liviana 2023 Community Economies Research Network, 4th International Online Conference. Today, November 2nd in the Western Hemisphere. Today, we're going to talk about mutual learning in Southern Chile and exploring the implications of long-term mutual learning within a Mapuche-led context in Southern Chile. So I don't need to go on who we are, but we are, my name is Allison Guzman, and together with Ignacio Krell, we're co-directors to Maple Microdevelopment Branch in Southern Chile since 2012, working with the Mapuche-led peoples of coastal Lake Budi, wetland lake, upon invitation to design a community-led, self-determined financial tool and coexistent with the Mapuche concept of Ichofimungyen, or all material and spiritual life beings of the territory. With over a decade as participants in an interdisciplinary research action collective, we address the emerging contributions of the Mapuche people through a mutual learning process. Together, we're exploring the role of regenerative economies and transitions to resilience and sustainability.
So we are currently working with several allies, both in the territory and also supporters worldwide. Within the territory of Lake Budi, main partners to this initiative that we are going to present, or that we are, are the communities of or LOF, which is the Mapuche concept for community, the LOF of Yaguipuyi, Malalhuechanco, and Ayipen. Together with them is some communication media, community radio, Working Kuruf, and Radio La Voz del Budi, as well as the Mapuche School of Communications and Film of the IRW Budi, and the Mapuche, the only Mapuche-run school in Chile with a Mapuche curriculum, which is the Kompulov Ñiquimeltuwe School. I think those are the main allies. And then the supporters are the financial support. Main financial supporter is the Packard Foundation, and then some technical allies are Fundación Kennedy, who specialize in wetland conservation, the Subdirección de Pueblos Indígenas, that's the Indigenous Peoples Bureau or something like that, from the Faculty of Engineering, Department of Engineering of University of Chile, and a small company called Masnewen is a regenerative family-owned business based in the Netherlands. And of course, Maple Microdevelopment, and Budianunca Environmental Association, who are our sister organization in Budi and really the main protagonist of this story. So just to give you some context of where we work, the Mapuche territory is a historic territory. It's an extensive region now separated between Chile and Argentina. The Mapuche are a resilient, numerous people living still in their ancestral lands, at least part of them. In Chile, they are about 1 million people. And economic wise they have to endure dramatic transformations in the last 150 years since the colonial invasion by Chile and Argentina and the division of their territory, which meant that they had to reinvent themselves very quickly from being a mobile, diverse, and wealthy people with strong commercial, agricultural, and manufacturing, even sectors, particularly textile, to mainly a subsistence peasant economy with limited access to communal lands. To more recently, in the last couple of decades, to rural economies cross-cutted by highly uneven modernization process, so-called quote modernization processes that have entailed exploitative linkages of Mapuche economies to regional monetized economies based on extractive sectors. In this very dynamic context, families are striving to revitalize their and basically recompose really their economic life. Today they are threatened by encroaching agribusinesses, tree plantations, and other forms of invasive so-called development, such as hydroelectric development, urbanization, and some certain kind of tourism, extractive or invasive tourism projects. Mapuche leaders and other sources are denouncing consistently that this invasive form of development jeopardizes their internationally recognized rights for self-determination and cultural survival. Within the Mapuche territory, there's a place called Lake Budi. It's a coastal territory of wetlands, of coastal wetlands, which has been historically populated by and administered, governed by Mapuche Lafkenche people. Lafkenche meaning the Mapuche people of the coastal areas or people of the sea. We have this geographic focus for the last 10 years as a long-term focus of our action research engagement that we are going to now discuss. But just a little bit more about Budi. This, as I said, this is a coastal territory. Oh, yes, Anna, do you need to, you have your hand? You are muted. Muted, Anna, still.
No,
There you go.
we forgot to introduce the role of liaison.
Oh,
So maybe if you guys want to go ahead and explain a little bit about that, because I'm doing my documentation here and I thought it'd be good that people know that this is happening.
Okay, yeah, that's a great idea. So the role of the liaison thank you, Anna, is a role that CEI has been, I guess, starting since last year through our Liviana sessions, but basically is the person in charge of taking notes and and requesting any form of participation from the audience so that it can be included into the CEI archive. This is a voluntary role, so I'm glad to say that for our session today, Ana Inés Eras will be the liaison for our conversation, and so we're all excited. We're excited to see how her idea on engaging participants today, for the CI memory, basically, for the future.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Thank you so much. Anyway, yeah, so in the core, at the heart of this territory, there is the Lake Budi, which is a coastal wetland declared regional conservation priority in 2002, because of its high biodiversity, particularly of birds, both endemic and migratory. But it's also recognized by the Mapuche-led biocultural heritage, personified in people like, for instance, Lorenzo Ayapan, is a UNESCO living heritage treasure for his work on precisely on biodiversity and the interpretation of the messages delivered by birds, by the birds' food. Just to give one example. Budi is a resilient territory, a home to 15,000 people distributed in more than 100 communities, which nonetheless has endured changes amidst colonial and neo-colonial threats and pressures of all kinds, including the imposition of external forms of owning and administering the territory. Communities in the last decade have come to realize that cumulative impacts of changes in land use and ownership, invasive agricultural practices pushed by the government often, combined now with climate change, and the cumulative impacts of deforestation, erosion, and water pollution, has deepened economic dependency and the out-migration of younger generations in search of a livelihood, basically. So this has resulted in changes in the land and limitations in self-governance, which threatens cultural and economic continuity of the Mapuche way of life in Budi ancestral lands.
Thank you, Ignacio, for giving the context. So with this in mind, what we wanted to present today was a little bit about the process, explain a little bit about the process and what we have been learning as allies and supporters to initiatives that the Mapuche people have been impulsing and implementing in their communities. Today, they face a twofold responsibility. They have to be both active leaders in their territories, revitalizing their language, their youth, working with the lands of their ancestors, but at the same time, they have to engage strategically in the Western world by being very, super educated and being articulate in Spanish or English or the other imposed language. And so what we've learned is that even though there are autonomous functions that are needed to revitalize in order for them to control and their decision-making processes, it does not necessarily mean that they need to act alone. And so, which is why we have been exploring even more the role of allies and supporters as part of a living and dynamic system in the building of economies of life prototypes. So what in 2012 began as an action research project upon invitation by the Mapuche community to determine ways and means to create a finance institution grew to become a full-fledged multidimensional initiative that encompasses innovation, trial and error, experimentation, adaptability, and documentation. So in terms of co-design, what we learned is that it's not just about participation, it's also about a mutual and collective learning from within the co-creative process themselves. So it's not just being inclusive. Oh, I'll allow you into my club. That means I'm being participatory. It's about literally working together and thinking together through. And so what we like to tell people what we're doing, our process is a process that involves an idea of a ripple effect, and exploring key moments of learning, where each ripple builds on from the previous, creating a full-fledged co-design process. And today is still growing and originated from the original stone release 10 years ago. So each concentric circle in the ripple involves a collective learning process. And that's where the tools and the protocols take shape gradually and over time, to build this a community-led protocols and initiatives that we're working on with today. So one very big aspect that we like to bring forth as a I would say a major indicator is the invitation. And we have learned that collective learning processes requires interaction and feedback loops across diverse areas of expertise. However, this is much more relevant as community-led and indigenous-led and self-determination when it began originally from the spirit of invitation. So that is something that we do think that is very relevant to consider 10 years later, that in our case, it was at a distance. The invitation was given to us at a distance, but online. So, you know, invitation can take place in however form. And then it was a year later when we moved to the communities, but that's a big part of what we still think is very important till today, to create a co-design process. As you all know, the Mapuche Bank, or the financial institution, grew multidimensionally. And today we're going to focus a little bit on where we're at today, which is linked to wetland restoration, biocultural revitalization, where we're paying more attention of Mapuche knowledge in dialogue with scientific knowledge and technical innovation, which is why our partners that is involved in this conversation today do come from entities that are experts in science, wetland conservation, but also technology, like the University of Chile, where we've been receiving support from engineering students. So that, in dialogue with Mapuche knowledge and traditional knowledge, has been a very interesting frontier land that we're exploring now. Mechanisms were created that align with the community strengths and values. And so with these partnerships, we're able to focus on initiatives that the communities themselves are prioritizing, including economic practices, as well as enhancing reciprocal exchanges and valuing community assets. We're creating protocols with our partners, meaning that there are forms of agreement to where the university, for example, is signing, and it's basically raising the bar on what it means to collaborate in an indigenous-led co-design process. As you all know, in 2014, we piloted the tool, but today it's taking its own form, and is one more entity to the network of allies, of community allies that Ignacio mentioned earlier, as part of this full-fledged multidimensional co-design process of many entities and partners and allies. So back to the wetlands, you know, wetlands have been resilient and a big part of indigenous communities and economies for a really long time, where fishermen and artisan communities depended on the ocean and coastal ecosystems to sustain themselves. And the way that they did that was through their deep knowledge of what it means to survive, using elements of healing, nutrition, material properties, life cycles. So that's why we're right now in a really strong kind of priority sense in wetland restorative, as part of the economic governance tools that are being running, even at a small scale. So within the framework of diverse economies and mutual learning moments, this is very important in terms of developing indigenous-led approaches to surviving well together. And only from such a process could appropriate indigenous-led biocultural conservation and wetland restoration emerge organically. So we do think the role of territory is becoming much more of a bridge connecting. It's a language, basically. It's a code. When we see economic co-design, diverse economies, wetland restoration within what Ignacio mentioned earlier, the Gualmapu Mapuche ancestral lands, it creates many bridges and connections. And so the challenge today that we face is, how is this relevant in terms of scaling up these co-design processes to a wider geographical scope at the Lake Budi level, which encompasses 120 Mapuche communities. So right now, we're now in a transition, trying to fully understand what that means. And a part of this experimentation design is the creation of a physical space. We like to call it a safe space where youth and leaders and custodians can talk openly about autonomous functions without having to perceive to be some kind of political agenda or whatnot. It's a safe space to experiment, to do trial and error, and to co-design for the horizon of future generations. So that's where we're at right now, in terms of building a place to nurture these prototypes that are being developed, which we're going to be mentioning in the next few slides. So yeah,
sorry,
yes.
you guys have your first slide on, and there are no other slides that we've seen so far. I'm just
really?
letting you know. Yes, I
Oh.
sent you a message point to let you know, but since you just said that about the slides, I thought I would tell you orally.
Huh. That's not, well, you guys missed a whole bunch of stuff then.
Well, we were able to follow by your narrative.
We were taking notes, yeah.
Oh wow, that was a large lecture then. Okay, let's see. Sorry about that. I mean, we had like maps and everything.
We missed the
Oh,
naked pictures.
oh.
I figured
I was
you
so
did,
I
but
was so
since right, you were so articulate in what you were saying, I didn't feel I could interrupt. That's why I sent a message, but then I was realizing you were not reading it, and so I said I'd better tell you.
Let's see.
Do you see it now?
Yeah, but
Okay.
this won't have our notes. But it doesn't
No,
matter.
no. We cannot see your notes.
Yeah, but we don't see the notes.
Oh,
Well, it's
you
fine.
don't see the notes.
It's okay.
Fine.
Yeah, it's fine. So so I was mentioning that we're in the middle of creating we want to experiment as the creation of a space, and we still don't know what that means yet. But we will in the next few years. And the main purpose is to have a safe place to talk about autonomous functions, especially economic autonomous functions. And in these past few months, we've been harnessing the idea of regenerative economies as a way to prioritize wetland conservation. So I wanted to mention 3 prototypes that we're working with the 3 communities or LOF that Ignacio mentioned. So the first one is in the LOF Yagipui. Should I just keep on talking?
Sure.
It's fine. Okay, because you get the conclusion actually.
Okay.
So in this community, they made they evaluated, or they made they basically came to an agreement that they wanted to focus on fruits of the forest. And because the community, wetlands have remnants of distinctive plant species that were once used as a form of nutritional value and is considered to be so still today. But the idea is that it becomes ever more as a main nutritional value, but with the surplus be able to generate some kind of incentive.
Maybe we.
Mhm.
Oh, sorry.
Mhm.
Maybe we can both contribute to this part.
Of course,
Since we don't
yeah.
have the notes.
Yeah.
So so basically the 3 communities, we work with them through 2 workshops, several conversations, presential and virtual, so they could work from the bottom up what kind of economic regenerative economies they wanted to work on,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And in this case, yeah, is what Alice was saying. And also, yes, I wanted to also say that Yagibuyi is a very numerous communities. These are several families that have very small plots of land, which they want to restore because they are heavily deforested. So they only have few remnants of native forests where they obtain these fruits.
Mhm.
And for basically for subsistence, for today, basically nowadays, basically the kids from the community, the little kids, go when it's the season of the maki or the season of the boldo or this and that, and they go and just pick the fruits, and it's a supplement to their diet. That's basically the use they have today for the food. So the idea is that in their small plots, they can start planting more of these trees.
Mhm.
And at the same time, yeah, basically, yeah, and
Mhm.
use it for both food and for generating a small income.
So, do you remember the Keyuwun Apoyo Mutuo or Mapuche Bank that we originally were invited to co-design? They have a strong role in this prototype as the place to add value to these fruits and to turn the material into a product that can be, whose surplus can be sold to local and international markets. And I say international because that's part of the learning process that we're going through right now, is that these fruits and nuts have been around for a really long time, but we are finding more appreciation and value added and investments interest from groups that are interested in regenerative economies, and that regenerative economic kind of network is around the world. And in this case, a group that's based in Holland has kind of come to our attention and has visited the communities. Actually, it was a requirement for them to visit the communities and meet with the Longo, the chief, and the Apoyo Mutuo, and basically talk about the importance of reforesting and revitalizing as the main priority to any economic incentive. So there you see in that beautiful gold looking liquid, that's the avellana nuts. This is Chilean avellana nut that was processed by the Apoyo Mutuo and had its first appearance
Mhm.
in Holland.
So can I go back?
Mhm,
So basically also the Apoyo Mutuo has the infrastructure today to
mhm.
buy from nuts from the members and other community members, and they process the nuts to obtain this oil, and from the oil we develop, or they develop with support from Masnewen, a prototype, which is, if we can go back and see the little, you see that little bottle, it has a QR on it, so people can follow the QR and can know more about the story of the product and the basically the vision of Apoyo Mutuo and Budianuncas through the bottle. So that's basically the prototype that we have already put, is already being tested in Europe, in Wageningen.
So that's kind of one of our first learning moment, or not learning moments, but what we are learning together with the communities is that the sustainable use of native forest fruits is linked to their valuation by emerging markets, underscoring the importance of establishing high quality strategic alliance in the regenerative sector. So it's not about selling the most as possible. It's literally, it's finding quality clients. Even if it's just one or two, that in itself will generate allies and support that becomes sustainable in the future. So that's one of the communities. The second community is plant fibers in Lofayipen. And here we want to talk about how the woman in this community, as Ignacio mentioned, made the decision to want to revitalize and strengthen native plant fibers that ancestrally were used for household items, but were discontinued through the usage of plastics and importation of, plastic. And now they want to revitalize it again as part of a livelihood, and generate capacity for the woman. But in the focus is not just the craft itself, but the origin of the fibers to be sustainably harvested and planted in the Budianunca's tree nursery, which is the environmental association sister organization that was founded a couple of years ago for the need to reforest the wetlands. So again, it's not the crafts. The crafts become part of a linkage system where the incentives are created for sustainable harvest and for planting in trees. Because at the moment, many just buy the materials in areas whose lands, whose origins are uncertain. So the idea is that they have the materials in their own homelands.
Can I add?
Mhm.
That this interest of this community came specifically from the women, the community, because in this case, as in the previous one, they have small plots of land. Maybe they have a little more reserves of forests, right? So they can obtain these fibers sustainably. But there's an interest and a vision of empowering women, basically, as expert weavers, so they can put value to their work. And it's basically this is a very work intensive area they want to work in, knowledge and work intensive. So the idea basically is that the women of the communities will have a chance to create value and generate an income from this activity.
And again, the allies are not just people who like crafts or people who want to support women. It are people who know about regenerative economies, meaning that they know that what they're purchasing is an item that that comes from an association or a group that are interested in planting trees and creating sustainable harvesting practices. So it's one more step of telling that story. That's where we are right now, is that challenge of what that actually means. So for example, the women here manage their own tree nurseries. That's linked to the fibers, which is linked to the to wetland restoration. So for example, that this top left picture is an engineering student who helped us put together a solar panel, a solar run water pumping system. So things like that have great, immense support from the engineering field to support practically the tree nurseries. So what we're learning is that the craft that to coexist with the land contains a holistic vision and resource management, from the origin of the waters and the species that cohabit with them to the ancestral knowledge that is still intertwined with the current inhabitants. And then finally, the third community is it's coming out as a forest lab, even though that's probably not the best word for it, but basically is the creation of community youth researchers from the communities.
So maybe just to give the context of this third community, this is a smaller community in terms of number of people. They managed to retain their communal title. That's different than the other two that were subdivided in small plots. This community has a communal title and has conserved, has preserved some forests, some remnants of, secondary forests, meaning, adult forests, big forests. And yeah, I just wanted to give that context. And there's also, even if it's a small community, there's plenty of youth, because each family, I don't know why, but basically they, maybe because they have a bit more, a better conditions, this youth has remain in the communities, while in the other two, the youth tends to, go away basically to high school, because they go to boarding school and never come back, as opposed to this community where they do have this wonderful forest and youth, particularly young women that want to stay in the community and do this work.
So they're becoming researchers. They're calling themselves researchers. And in this case, they're collecting and archiving knowledge from their elders, and wanting to experiment with using modern processing machines and tools to combine ancestral forms of healing with modern forms of, not modern forms of healing, but with new ways of incentivizing youth to create economy. So but in this case, actually, they're not prioritizing the profit. They are prioritizing research, which we find very interesting.
Basically, they want to improve, or I don't know if improve, but to develop a more a holistic way of managing the forest from a Mapuche viewpoint or worldview, but also incorporating Western techniques and methodologies of forestry management, so basically they can take advantage sustainably of some of the key resources, or not resources, life forms that are inhabiting these beautiful forests they have.
Like, so for example, we had a community meeting with them the other day, and one of the youth, who's probably around 19 years old, she says, we need to find ways to remain in our communities. But at the same time, we can't negate the fact that, you know, we pay bills, we have phones. So there's an acknowledgement of this duality and needing to find the balance
Right.
of coexisting with their lands and forests, using their traditional knowledge, in respect with the elders, but at the same time taking up a new space of innovation and gradual interpretation of their own space and their own territory as researchers, and being in control of that, because with Ignacio, we think that this is very relevant because more and more outsiders are going to be interested in extracting such knowledge, deep and embedded knowledge, due to climate change and the transition that we all desperately need to do as a global society. So how do communities such as these keep themselves intact while maintaining control of their patrimony and their intellectual property? And so what we're learning in this case is the young Lefkenche people play a main role, becoming researchers of their own territories, incorporating new tools, but relying on their own knowledge, the legacy of their families and loves that have coexisted with the forest for generations. So we're kind of nearing the end. I think these are kind of conclusive remarks of where we're at today. It's all exploratory, so it's still in a learning kind of component, or a learning spirit, if you may. But indeed, the need to connect with like-minded clients, and clients is not even the word. But basically like-minded allies and supporters who understand the role of regeneration and wetland regenerative economies.
Mhm. I think that a key point here is that these three prototypes are linked together. Actually, we see them now as moments, as a circle, a big regenerative circle, where basically each one of them goes back through a mechanism that we are designing with the three communities together. They have to go back to regeneration concretely. So basically, we are working with our allies in Wageningen to create a system where the earnings that they will, or we will all be producing through this interchange, not only will pay a fair price or a fair value for the work of the weavers and the families producing the oils and so on, and delivering the different nuts and components, but also the surplus produced through bringing this stuff to Europe is going to come directly back to finance the tree nurseries. I think that's the key point here.
Yeah. So meaning that the allies that we're connecting with are committed to in turn donating a part of the proceeds back to the nursery. So we're kind of designing the way that money flows, I guess. So because it's not necessarily money that, I mean, how do we vote with money? How do we use money intentionally to create an external economy that supports an internal economy?
Right.
So it's we're kind of like tinkering that.
And again,
Yeah.
how this circle basically also in a way becomes part of the story we are offering, and in that way part of these products that are being offered to users that value this story and this circular movement. So yeah, as a final general discussion, we are together with this idea of circularity and so on, we are very interested in highlighting the idea of recommoning as a main dynamic of this whole proposal. As I mentioned before, I'm not even sure I mentioned in the introduction, but I should have. The Mapuche communities have been basically encroached by external powers that have disrupted their communal ways of administering the territory by subdividing the lands and by imposing this so-called agricultural modernization, which basically means each family has to buy inputs, get in debt, then repay the debt, and bring the stuff to the markets individually or through cooperatives, but in a logic of market management. So our challenge, we feel, or the challenge that communities are facing, even if they don't say that they don't use the word commoning, they basically talk about resuming the Mapuche ways of doing stuff. Basically, we understand in the through the lens of the CERN framework that basically what is going on is that they are not only recommoning but basically reinventing the ways that commoning is possible under circumstances that have changed dramatically and where they are inevitably now immersed in a monetized economy where they face technological dependency. They need the cell phones and they need to buy them from corporations based on China or elsewhere. So, how do you deal with that, or how do you recommon? And in the other hand, the lands were subdivided in family plots, and you are not going to pay back those family plots. It's impossible. People are not going to give up their family plots once they are subdivided. But then how can they come together and agree in ways to manage the plots, in coherent ways, so biodiversity and biocultural heritage is restored.
So it goes beyond fence lines, basically.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, I think that's where we're at right now. That's it.
Discussion on that?
Yeah.
That's it.
Oh,
Okay.
what was the last slide?
That was a Spanish version of
Ah,
the
nice.
Yeah.
Oh, the lovely photos.
Oh, but yeah, it was still important, Alison. I would say let's translate. So
Okay.
says that as a just general final comments is the purpose of generating these safe spaces that Alison mentioned before for dialogue and experimentation, which also means
apolitical.
means to have basically the luxury of experimentation because
Yeah.
and that means to have how do you create that space. We think it's through mutual support and basically through commoning. Then they need to be civilized, the ability of the territories to propose, la capacidad de propuesta.
I mean, if anything, that is the role of allies and researchers, is to give the tools so that territories can generate more and more proposals, because it's almost urgent that their proposals are being heard.
Yeah. I think this refers to a role of as allies, this final. And finally, as maybe as ally researchers, this is something we've been discussing a lot, is about how do we get ourselves and our allies within academia and science and technology to acknowledge that the main producers right now of this new knowledge or how to carry on these transitions and circular economies and so on are the territories themselves. So how do we, starting from there, talk, start talking about co-production and dialogue of knowledges and all that, but in a more, because sometimes we feel that people say this stuff and or write about it, and now it's almost mandatory to put somewhere, that you are doing some sort of dialogue and co-production. But are we really meaning it? Or, I mean, so then we think that if we are going to talk about co-production and dialogue knowledge, it's key that we acknowledge and understand that it's the territories and the communities that are actually producing original knowledge. And we, as allies, academics and scientists, if we are doing well our job, we think, and this is up to discussion. The good thing is that it's the last slide, so you can tell us what you think. If we do well our job, we should be providing the tools, the financing, the resources, the methodologies, and some lenses and conceptual frameworks that might be useful as tools, to carry on the processes. But the original knowledge on how to carry these processes are the communities. So yeah, Alison, anything?
Oh, that's it.
That's it.
Right.
Thank you, guys.
Fantastic.
Were any of you, besides Alison and Ignacio, able to hear the Mapuche terms? Did you distinguish them as they were talking?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to read out loud some of the terms I caught, and I am sure that my pronunciation is really bad, but I'd like to try them out.
Mm.
Lof, Lafkenche, Lofayipen, Keluwun, Itrofilmongen, Welmapu, Werkenkuruf, Yagepuli, Kompulof, Budianunca, Malalwechinko.
Yeah.
Impressed.
Wonderful. Yeah, we are also, that's also a focus. We are personally learning. We are trying. at
I
least.
know that. That's why I wanted to introduce this, because I
Yeah.
think that, and with this, I start my comment on your work, which
Yeah,
I already
yeah.
said I love. So
Thank you,
building on that love,
Yeah.
I'd like to offer that you have been showing me, at least, all this while, that as you keep on working and becoming an ally, you are also faced with challenges. And I think that language is one of those challenges.
Mhm.
Also because I think, Alison, you told me at one point that they were hearing you in particular with your ways in Spanish as different from Ignacio's Spanish. At some point, I think you told me about that and what that created for you. But then also Ignacio, I remember, started learning Mapuche a while ago. And I think that that purposeful task of becoming knowledgeable in someone else's language, in this case, and knowledge, makes it so that that's a statement in itself. So I wanted to bring this up because I think, and since I have the privilege of seeing you along, it's nice for me to realize those, everyday actions you take in building this collaboration in this way. So
Thank you.
paso palabra, I pass the word
Thank
with
you.
that comment.
Just a comment on that. Yeah. So we went in this presentation into some of the sort of specifically economic components of the work Budianunca is leading, but there is a sort of another or underlying work that is very important that has to do precisely with what you mentioned, Anna, which is the revitalization of the Mapuche language as a source of knowledge and conceptual frameworks. And actually, one of the work there, or there, that's why we didn't brought it in, because we are not leading it. It's being led by the community themselves, and specifically by a community researcher and filmmaker called Juan Rain.
From the researching community, yeah.
Right. So he's compiling a lot of material, audiovisual, of the community elders, talking about their knowledge of how the territory was administered, and what are the specific areas of traditional knowledge that are still important for livelihoods and so on. So the great challenge now is, what do we do with this material? How do we systematize
And
it?
it's in Mapudungun.
It's all in Mapuche.
Like, in a way, we're just showing it now without any translation. We're just seeing how people are reacting
And
to it.
and one of the things, so there's going to be an archive with all the
Yeah.
material, but then we want to also have a sort of a written document, and an important part of the written document is going to be precisely a glossary with
Mhm.
key definitions of these keywords of Mapudungun that will help people, Mapuche and no Mapuche, to have key conceptual frameworks for understanding the way Mapuche see the territory.
Because, I mean, if you think about it, diverse economies stems from diverse languages. I mean, when you do one interaction with another, you're physically making the exchange, right? But the same is with language. We're making an exchange now as we talk in English. And for many generations, indigenous communities were, they forced themselves or were forced to speak another exchanging language, when their original language held just as much economic knowledge, especially an economic language that's linked to the land. So interestingly enough, when you learn an indigenous language, you start to open up other ways and means of understanding territory. And because when people explain the definition of a word, it's not necessarily like a glossary and a dictionary. It's descriptive. Yeah, there's a story until finally you're like, oh, I get it. That's how you learn, land-based languages, I guess. I don't know. That at least and then there's a myth that we can only speak one language. I don't know who spread that, but our ancestors spoke like 10 languages, all of us. So anyways, yeah.
So what you're saying there really reminds me of some of the discussion we had after Mary's keynote, because she was talking about the social economy markets in Kenya mainly. And, she was presenting it in terms of, characteristics like solidarity and reciprocity. But then, in the questions, what became really clear is that what she's got is this incredible archive that's basically songs and stories. So she sat in markets and she learned stories and she sang songs with principally women, and out of that she's sort of distilled the principles, if you like, or the ethics of an African social economy. But somehow in the translation, all those, there's no sense of the songs or the stories. And it was, I love her work and I love what she's doing, but I had no sense from her work that I've read that actually underpinning it is this incredible archive. She said she's got basically mountains of songs and stories, but she doesn't, we don't see them, we don't hear them. And it's all presented in terms of and I know she's putting a Western lens onto it, and partly that's because she's feels like she's talking to a Western audience, and she, wanting to get things published in the West and so on. But it was just, I don't know, it felt like a sort of erasure of this incredibly rich,
Mm.
data. But
Mhm.
and what you're saying is, yes, you want to, and you don't want to. It's not like you want to translate the words into English.
Mm.
You want to respect what they mean in their context.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Right. So this glossary, indeed, what we are thinking after thinking a bit, is that the glossary is not going to be a translation. It's going
yeah,
to be
yeah,
explained, in Mapuche. So these
yeah.
keywords, for instance, one that Anna mentioned, nitrofilmonyen, which is normally thrown around and translated as biodiversity, or
all life
the web of life,
or all life that is seen and unseen
or all unseen or unseen.
Yeah.
There's many translations possible or interpretations, but what we want to do is to explain in Mapuche, Dumun, in a couple of paragraphs or wherever it takes, what
Yeah.
is nitrofilmon and what is the deeper sense of it. And maybe then translate that explanation. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Because
I was going
oh.
to add to that in our last meeting in Southern Chile, the session we had, or in the session prior to that one, I can't remember. We were talking about this proposal we put in for CI, which we were not lucky to get the funds, but I'm talking about the flourish funds. But anyhow, bringing in all the knowledge we created over the past 2 or 3 years to put together some piece of writing. In our proposal, we were brainstorming about ways in which we can show the different languages that are used not only in our meetings, but in the work we do with people. And we started to think about putting parts of this publication we may be able to get together at some point, put the words and descriptions in different languages. And now that I'm hearing you talking again about this, I'm thinking that also maybe a way to do this would be to have the publication be digital and link it to the narration, like you were just saying, it would be nice that people could hear that. Even, I mean, I love it when I hear something and I really don't understand it. I don't care at that point, because what I'm caring about is about engaging with what's being told. And I think that kind of experience is something that it'd be worth exploring, and or also asking, in your case, Mapuche people, in our case, different other people, to choose images, either art they've done or pictures, literal pictures of their places, to come together with the text. So and my head is exploding in different ideas I'm getting about how to keep on working on this piece that I kind of started to compile in our group. So it's nice.
Great. Thank you, Anna.
Yeah, and just to add to that, like you've got that wonderful photo of the young people using their mobile phones as an older person's obviously explaining something. But I think with the glossary, I mean, I think to actually have somebody in the location, like that word that you sort of explained, Ignacio, which was the life. What was it?
The web of life or biodiversity.
Yeah. So I can just sort of imagine somebody standing in a forest area and explaining the word in situ, and I can imagine them, looking around and pointing to things, and so actually to film it, and then because then it becomes so alive, and then to have a sort of translation of parts of what they're saying. But I think what you would get from hearing and seeing somebody doing it via film could be incredibly, evocative.
Yeah, we're kind of in that process, because so one of the challenges that we've ventured in is understanding how regenerative economies is linked to to wetland conservation, or I don't even like the word conservation, but wetland restoration, right? But how do we know that the wetland is being restored? So that's how we are, that's why we are working with partners that can use monitoring mechanisms of indicators to know that the wetland is being restored in time. However, that same monitoring system is not applicable in the Mapuche knowledge system. So we're trying to understand, okay, how do we understand monitoring? And in fact, there's a team of monitors now that emerged, and they call themselves observers, or what is the Mapuche word for it? Yeah, so it's like 2 youth from 3 communities that are observing their territory, applying what they're learning from the, the science-based monitoring, but also using these dialogues with their elders that are being filmed, and trying to, and we're working together to understand how to merge these two. And if only there was a way to express monitoring in the Mapuche sense that is not so linear. Like, oh, in 5 years we want 5 turtles. In 10 years we want 20 frogs. I don't know. It's different in. So what's emerging is, for example, plant medicine.
But you still want to have indicators that you can track over time, because otherwise, again, it's the issue. So you can have all these qualitative things, but if you cannot say, in 10 years from now, well, we got more frogs or less frogs, it's hard to, communicate what you're doing. It's hard to, improve or, take measures. So we do, and they acknowledge it's not something that I'm saying.
Right, but the thing is, how do we merge the science?
Yeah, that's the question of the $1 million.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we are exploring. And I was just saying how can that be expressed in a non-linear way? Yeah, and so the use
While
of films
being linear in a way. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, well,
it's like the
we're figuring it out.
Yeah, and we also want to visit other experiences. We are planning a trip. Actually, we were thinking, we came to Colombia actually in part to see if we could do some contacts and stuff. It was a very short time, so.
And then we got sick.
Yeah, but we did one good contact, so we may be coming back with the folks and the ladies.
Yeah, we want to know places, if you all have any in mind, of safe places where people are talking about and experimenting together.
New Zealand is too far. Otherwise.
But I'm sure there's, I imagine there are all these hubs that are emerging everywhere. Like actually Anna has one in Argentina there with her.
Anna is closer.
Yeah. So how, these groups that are generating knowledge together.
But yeah, that's important too, to see how other folks have, figured it out or advanced.
Yeah, I thought you were coming here this year.
That's what we thought too. I think.
Anytime you're welcome, of course.
Thank you.
Yeah,
so I wonder what Andrew's.
Before Andrew goes, I just want to tell you a very short story about language use. A couple of weeks ago, I went to see a film that was put together by this collective that is documenting the fight over water in Mendoza. Those would be good folks for you to link with. I'll send you their contact. And they put together a film. I'm not going to tell the whole story about the film, but what they did was that at the very beginning, they put an animation with Guarape language. And since they were financed by the National Institute of Film in Argentina to put together that film, they were told that they couldn't use a language that was not Spanish if it was not translated. And they didn't want to translate it because their point was to have us all listen in a different language, right? And so they got into this argument. Finally, they got it. They were allowed to do it, but go and figure.
Mhm.
Anyhow,
Mm.
Andrew.
I was just thinking actually while you were talking, something that some of my colleagues in Western Canada have been working on, in the area of IPCAs, Indigenous Protected and Conserved Areas. They've been working the last few years to develop a bit of a regional hub actually, that they call the IPCA Innovation Center, I believe. I can send you the link.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, but just see, yeah, there it is. Yeah, and it's basically, the idea is to make it a hub to bring together, local indigenous nations, as well as allies of various kinds,
Oh,
whether it be
great.
conservation organizations, government agencies, scientists, whatever. Yeah, so that's been going for a couple years now.
Mhm.
That's great. This is exact. I mean, it would be great to learn more.
Yeah.
We'll take a look at the website.
Suk.
Yeah,
Oh, is
South
it with the
Nation.
South Nation? Or what
Southern
is
Nation
that?
is part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
They
So
came to visit.
yeah.
Yeah. Chief
Oh, did they really?
Chief
Yeah.
Gordon.
Oh,
Yeah.
Chief Gordon Planus. Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
that's interesting.
Yeah, small world. Well, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Maybe we should consider.
We actually started the Gordonist party in Chile.
The what, sorry?
The Gordonist party. No, no, it was really a lovely visit. Chief Gordon is a leader of the South Nation, which is a very small nation in Vancouver Island.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
visited the communities
they're
with
not far from Victoria.
in
yeah.
Victoria in
Yeah, but right on the South Vancouver Island. Yeah, that's right. So
Mhm.
yeah, no,
and they are in the plan of building a regional link network, a regional network with communities doing this kind of work for Mother Earth,
I
as he put it.
mean, wouldn't it be great if we could just bypass state-centric economies and indigenous communities can just trade with each other around the world? And I mean, I don't know. That would
yeah,
be cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, global tapestry of alternatives. That's good too. Yeah, sure. But yeah, I was kind of thinking as you guys were talking as well, because yeah, I know. So you said you're a member of the ICCA consortium as well, right?
Mhm.
So
So that's
yeah, I
the
was just,
consortium of territories of life for Jenny and Anna. It's a network of indigenous conservation territories.
yeah,
Sort of.
yeah, because you said around the lake, you said it was 140 communities.
150, yeah.
150,
About, yeah.
yeah,
And surrounded by Mapuche communities, which is unlike other lakes in Chile. So it really is an earth
It's a hub
ship
itself.
waiting for innovation and experimentation with indigenous communities, like ready to go. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
We see a big opportunity, despite, in Chile, Lake Woody is often seen as a problem, as a, sort of untractable problem, because from a conservation and, development viewpoint, because there's so many people and overpopulated and we actually see a big opportunity, a big potential for restoration and for doing something really unique.
Yeah, we need more people though, I think.
yeah,
We need more allies and
Anna said, so all over southern Chile, the Mapuche communities are, pushing back to regain their lands and obtain these so-called, coastal marine spaces, which is a special law in Chile, and some of them have been really successful on that. A different thing is environmental and biocultural restoration of these recovered lands.
Yeah,
That's
I'm pointing this out though, because when he presented a couple of days ago, he was saying something to this effect, what you're now saying, that is, that apparently they're gaining back their espacio marino and coastal space, costero, even though it's under that legal figure. It seems that some of those communities are thinking more in terms of what you're calling regeneration, restoration. So that's why it clicked my mind that maybe you could talk with him more specifically about this particular issue, because I think that in the detail, as we all know from doing the inventory, the diverse ways of doing things emerge, and it seems that, of course, not all those communities are the same, of course, and that there's some that, the way I understood it from his presentation, maybe I'm wrong here, is related to all these other aspects. So I think and they're closer to you guys, and in a way they are under the same paradigm in a way. I mean, their relationship with the Estado de Chile,
absolutely. Yeah. So Daniel was in Viviana presente? Oh.
Because remember that for the session, the one we did in Spanish, that Antonia y Juliana la coordinaron, and they sent an email saying whomever would like to take a spot in presenting. And so there were several people, I think there were 5 people presenting, and whomever raised their hand, I think they went in.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been traveling a lot.
Yeah, I was sick these days. Frankly, I don't know. We just barely made it to this 1 2 hour session.
I wanted to go back to something you said earlier about allies, supporters, and then you used the word clients, and then you self-corrected yourself and said, no clients. But then I kept on thinking, yes, also clients. I mean, it'd be nice, I think, to explore those different, and also I bring this up because sometimes in the work we do with people who call themselves organizaciones populares, mostly in Buenos Aires and surrounding areas, some of those organizaciones populares have a very strong stance against the capitalist market, and therefore their economy many a time suffers from not wanting to become part of that chain of exchange. And so I'm thinking, and those are some of the cases we work with. There are other cases and places that are maybe more similar to what you were talking about, but I think that's an interesting point. And even ourselves, sometimes we have prejudice against using words like clients.
Yeah. Jenny, were you going to say something?
I sort of had a question, and I was interested that you were using the idea of prototypes, and so I was interested to know more about who the prototypes were for. So that I'm assuming that they were for the other communities around Lake Budi. But then in your third last slide, you used the phrase commercial prototype, which I could see was sort of applying to the first 2 examples. But then the third one with the young people as researchers, I mean, that's a whole different sort of prototype. But I wondered if you could say more about that decision to use the idea of prototyping.
Well,
and where the third example fits in relation to that.
I'll take a stab at it and you can. Okay, so originally the use of prototype was when we began with the Mapuche Bank component, the apoyo mutuo, simply because it was an ongoing entity with no exact, you know, what do you call it, formula. So that's why the use of the word prototype was comfortable to be said amongst the communities. And so you understanding that context, we like to use the word prototype in general because it suggests a certain kind of experimental phase. It's not in its final phase. There's, you know, adjustments and ways to, you know, step out if needed, or, you know, see things differently. But particularly in this case, yeah, you hit the nail on the head, is the first, it's the first relationship we're having with the private sector. And again, I'm using a word that is not ideal in a neoliberal context, but how do we access allies and supporters who are not able to be here physically with us, but are wanting to be a part of the regenerative restoration of Lake Booty by conscious consumerism, I guess, to put it in one way, or through an intention that, and I don't mean the when I think clients is probably not the right word, indeed, because it's not necessarily that we're trying to reach out a group of people. We're going through one ally and supporter, which is a couple, a family-owned company based in Holland, who are committed to not only access or purchasing the prototypes ahead of time, which is what is in dire need, meaning that well, I can talk about this forever, but basically families need to know ahead of time how to make money. And right now, and if they knew ahead of time how to make money on a year to by year basis, women will be able to plan their budget a lot easier. Today, they're just doing it on a month by month process, you know, season by season. If they're able to do it year by year. Anyways, I don't want to get into that. But so in that sense, the commitment is beyond just an intermediary. It's a company that invested in cultural protocols. They came down to Chile to talk with the traditional authorities to get on the same page of what it means to collaborate. And we feel like there are more out there. So that's why we're calling it prototypes. I don't know, Ignacio, you. And then, yeah, with this third community, we're not using the word prototype. I guess we are using the word prototype, but not from the perspective of commercialization, but more from this need to create a research model of some sort that comes from. But yeah, you're right. Maybe the third community is mostly
more a model than a
model.
prototype.
Yeah.
No, well,
Thank you.
I mean,
Well,
yeah,
it could be a research prototype.
Yeah, this whole issue of wording is interesting to say.
We're just coding things at the moment, I think.
Yeah.
But
I can see for a funder the idea of, you know, getting in on the ground floor and, you know, funding, you know, like that, so that for some that, yeah, the idea that you're helping fund a prototype, or you're investing in development of a prototype could be really appealing. Then it's just, you know, strategic decisions that you make about.
But a key question you asked, Jenny, I think is for prototype for whom? I mean, who's going to evaluate the prototype? And the answer is the communities are permanently evaluating. You know, of course, there's, you know, we are going to evaluate, you know, how it goes in Europe, whether it has any, you know, outlet, if people are interested, if, you know, the whole concept is understood, because it's not only the oil, it's the whole story, right? So when people in Europe will be buying this, they will be buying, quote, or clients will be buying a story, which is the story of regeneration, and the idea that part of the income will go back directly to the community tree nurseries and so on. So we are trying it out. We will get feedback, and no, when I say we and the communities, and mainly the communities, will evaluate if this is really what they need, and what they want to scale up and continue to do in the future. Basically, that's the idea. And with regards, Anna, to what you said, is something that I think it goes into the category of the creative tensions, right? I mean, it's one more creative tension where are we willing to engage with markets? What kind of markets? Are we talking about markets, or are we talking about networks, allies or clients, or is both? Or it depends,
Right, that's why I was trying to say that we can use the tool of inventory to inventory your own work in order to elaborate on those synergies and tensions, and so I think it's worth doing.
Yeah, but we have always been of the opinion, or posture, ¿cómo se dice? Nuestra parada
Position, your position,
has been always that we need to risk it. I mean, we need to try and engage, and if we need to engage with markets, we
there's no
engage with
doubt about
markets.
that.
Otherwise, we
But we've been working for the last few years in strong protocols and strong community-led
governance.
governance.
That's key also.
So I think that's the foundation for being able to risk more later, I guess.
Right.
I think that's the key also, because this prototype and this whole thing, right, it has trial and error and risk and engaging with markets and all that, but the other part of it is governance, is self-governance, and the elders having the last word, and everyone getting to be heard in assemblies, and having all the information on the table, and mediating the different positions. And so so I think that's the key thing. We were talking here in Colombia with someone, I don't remember, but she was asking the lady from the Cauca region. She was telling us that they wanted to start woman business and enterprise of handicrafts in the Cauca region, which is a region hit by post-conflict here in Colombia. And we were telling her that that there's a risk of falling also into neoliberal and sort of clientelistic situations, where you go into with an NGO with projects, and the ladies will tell you, and sure, let's do this, and
But I feel like it's like a movement, like just like everything in life, finding the balance is in itself. Sometimes it's the process that's more important than the results. Like I think that.
Yeah.
I think that.
And the process has to do with self-governance, with autonomous decision making. The thing is, claro, so you have, this is also something that maybe we should have put in the presentation, but so we have come to realize also, and not in dialogue with the communities, that the economies always had to do with interdependence. You cannot have an autonomous economy in the sense that you don't depend on anyone, and you just sort of. Can I see the thing?
Oh, I was just looking at Andrew was saying.
So economies always entail some sort of interdependence, even if it's with the local, your local ecosystem. But but in the world we live in, it's normally with other communities and other actors. But in the other hand, decision making has to be autonomous. So you take account for the interdependence, but in that context, you have to make your own decisions on how you want to engage with these interdependencies.
I mean, it makes you wonder whether communities, whether indigenous or not, are more resilient when they are much more networked and involved. I'm curious. I don't know. And if the remnants of communities that are not, anyways, that can be a whole other research. Okay.
Yeah, actually, that applies to, we've been working with these small groups. Some of them are formal cooperatives and some are not, in the area of mental health. And a few months ago, we published a book where we worked with people in those projects and processes to reflect on how they do things. And we found that what you're saying, that once we started working to narrate their stories and reflect on them, the myriad of relationships that compose who they are is really enormous, big, large. So that was very interesting for them. For some people, it came as a shock. It was like they were talking about, we are as a small organization and this and that and the other. And then when they started showing us even maps they had crafted about who they link with, it was like, hello. So that was interesting in itself. And what you're saying about autonomous decision, that's also very similar to some of these experiences, because, for example, there's one of these groups that has been functioning within an NGO, but they started the process of becoming a formal cooperative as well. So they will have both organizations. And they are in the process of becoming a cooperative, right? And in the NGO, they already have these processes of assemblies and this and that and the other. But because they're formalizing themselves as a cooperative, they're starting to understand how the formal processes go and this and that. But what they're saying is that, well, we already know how to do cooperatives without even being a formal cooperative, because we understand what it means to be autonomous. That was sort of their line. So that's like, okay, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe, so sorry, Ana. You
No,
want
nada, ya está, ya está.
So I think we are
Lo
going
único
to.
que estamos llegando al final de la hora, I think, so whenever you guys want to call it, just.
If you have any last words, Andrew, Jenny, and we call it a session, because we need to keep moving to the airport right now.
And thank you so much.
That's why I'm reminding you.
I love how you use the ripples, and I love how every time I hear you talk about your work, I can, I see I feel like I'm witnessing, observing the ripples. So thank you for telling us about another ripple in your wonderful work.
I'm glad that
and travel safe.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much for joining our session, and we look forward to keeping you all posted also.